The room where silence trembled. It was supposed to be another closed-door meeting, another polite exchange of diplomatic phrases wrapped in smiles. But that morning, inside a heavily guarded chamber in Washington, D.C., silence had a different weight. It wasn't peace, it was pressure. The kind that builds when two worlds collide, one built on centuries of dominance and the other forged in rebellion. A winter's sun crawled weakly through the curtains as the flags of two nations stood side by side, one draped in stars, the other in dust and defiance. At the center of the table sat Ibrahim Traoré, the young president from Burkina Faso, a man who had risen from the smoke of revolution to challenge the empire that had long dictated Africa's fate. Opposite him sat Donald Trump, returning to the scene with his usual mix of confidence and calculation, eyes narrowing like a man who could read the price tag on everything. The meeting was never meant to be public. It was classified. Yet every word exchanged in that room would echo through corridors of power around the world. "Mr. Traoré," Trump began, his tone clipped, transactional. "You've gained attention, the world watches you. But power," he leaned back, "requires alignment. We can work together if you play by the rules." Traoré's gaze was calm, almost surgical. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. "The rules," he said quietly, "were written by those who feared a free Africa." A pause. Even the translators hesitated, sensing the current shifting in the air. Trump smirked, trying to regain the stage. "Everyone plays by someone's rules, even you. Don't forget who funds the roads, the aid, the arms, and the wars," Traoré interrupted, his voice rising like distant thunder. He leaned forward, his hands clasped. "We remember who funds the wars too, Mr. Trump." For a heartbeat there was nothing, only the faint hum of the air conditioner, the echo across the ocean. By the time the news leaked, the story had already outgrown the walls that tried to contain it. A journalist from Le Monde caught wind of a heated diplomatic exchange. Within hours, headlines across Europe and Africa carried one phrase: Traoré confronts Trump. In Washington, the State Department scrambled. They called it a misunderstanding, a passionate exchange of views. But in Ouagadougou, the streets were alive. Drums, chants, flags. To the people, this wasn't misunderstanding. It was vindication. For decades, African leaders had bowed their heads before Western powers, speaking of partnership while chained by dependency. Traoré had just torn that mask apart, and the world was watching. Inside the Pentagon, analysts studied his words like they were decoding a threat. In Paris, diplomats whispered of a new African axis, nations inspired by the same defiance. And in Beijing, quiet smiles spread behind polished teacups. But what no one realized was that Traoré hadn't spoken for spectacle. He'd spoken out of necessity. For him, it wasn't about Trump, it was about truth. Burkina Faso was bleeding. Terror had ravaged its villages. The old alliances had failed. He saw the deals, the aid, the promises, all built to maintain control, not restore peace. And so when Trump told him that power requires alignment, Traoré heard the ghost of every empire that had once occupied his land. He refused to bow. And in that refusal, he became more dangerous than any army. Late one night, a cable arrived from the U.S. Embassy in Accra. Traoré's rhetoric poses a growing ideological threat. His anti-imperial stance is resonating beyond West Africa. Beyond the language of diplomacy, one message was clear. The young soldier president had just redrawn the map of influence. In the coming weeks,
Western delegations approached with softer tones. Let's reset. Let's find common ground. But Traoré knew the pattern. First they flatter, then they fund, and then they own. He refused the loans. He declined the conditional aid. And when asked in a press briefing about U.S. concerns, he replied with the